Hey everyone, on another episode of on.net, we have the kickoff of the Microsoft Identity series, and today I have Matthijs Hoekstra with me today to talk about app registrations and service principles. Join us. Welcome to another show on .net. Today I have Matthijs Hoekstra with me to talk about service principles and app registration. This is part of our series on identity for developers, Microsoft Identity for developers. And we're starting with some of the basics because I think having a good foundation around what app registration and service principles are is very important as you embark into your journey. So Matthijs, thanks for coming today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's been a while. I've seen you, so.
It's been a while for everyone. It's been, 5 months since I had any human contact outside my family. So let's not go there.
So, yeah, thanks for having me. So what do you want to talk about today?
Well, I did say app registration and service principles because getting your head around it is always tricky. Like, when do we use what? What is which, right? So what is an app registration? How does a service principle hang behind that? If I'm creating an application, what should I care as a developer about? And then how we use them.
Yeah, it's a good topic. And it's a lot. It's a source of confusion as well, right? I don't understand what the difference is between app registration, service principle. I know this enterprise apps thing. So where do I do what and all that stuff. So let me explain a bit of the how I like to think about these topics, and feel free to ask me any questions, and we can dive into it. So I did bring my simple PowerPoint deck I've been using in the past, just to get you an idea of what we are doing here. So
love me some PowerPoint.
I know, right? So the first thing is that since we are talking about OIDC and all modern authentication with the Microsoft Identity Platform, but it's the same concept for any identity platform you will use, is you have to tell the system about your application. It has to know what kind of authentication experience it has to offer the users. So the first thing you have to do after you decide which IDP you're going to use, so let's assume it's Microsoft Identity Platform, you have to tell the system about your application. Yeah. That's what we do when we start doing an application registration. It's nothing else than telling the system about the existence of your app and how to treat users or applications coming in and doing authentication.
Right.
And in our platform, and that's going to be the same. If you want to build a Facebook application, you have to register it with Facebook. Same with Google and all the other IDPs. So that's a basic concept which everybody has to do. There's stuff we do as Microsoft to enrich that experience for the users, but in the basic stuff, it's still register your app. So you're going to tell us about your application, the name, it can have a logo, and we have to configure some authorization and security pieces, and we're going to talk you through that as well. But the end result is going to be one app registration, and that will be an application object. These are like Azure Active Directory terms we use.
Right.
So you will find client ID, app ID, application ID. That's just the same thing for an application registration. Yeah. So let's just start with that. I will cover service principles a little bit later. So if you go to the portal, which I have here,
that's the Azure AD portal inside Azure, right?
Yeah. You go to portal.azure.com, and then you go to the most important page in the portal, which is Azure Active Directory. And I happen to be a global admin, but you go to app registrations here.
Yeah, you don't have to be a global admin to create app registration.
No. You have to be an app administrator. There's different roles which you can assign to. So you have to do this application registration. And if you're a developer, either you have your own AD environment where you can play and test. That's what I did. This is one of the M365 developer programs I created one through. But otherwise, you're going to be best friends with one of your administrators to help you out. This is actually also a reason or a source of confusion, because the app folks know they need to set up and what kind of configuration they need to do. The admins might not always understand what they're trying to do. So you actually have to start working together to make sure you do it in the proper way. It's like
I think these days there's also a way to programmatically create app registration. Is that correct?
Yeah, I will get to that. So anything I'm going to do now is going to be you're going to be able to do it through an API.
Stealing your thunder, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So and especially when you start doing automation, DevOps, scripts. So
yeah.
Let me just show you through what an app registration actually is, and then how you as an administrator can control who can do what, right? So
great.
The first step is when you create a new application is give the name on .NET.
And this needs to be unique to the tenant itself, right? And anything that describes the app, so it doesn't have to be globally unique or whatever, right?
It's just a name in this sense, right? So you can do whatever you want here. The first choice you're going to make is this application just available for my own company? It's like all my users inside of my tenant or directory. Tenant and Active Directory is all the same term for the same thing. I can create an application which is available for multiple tenants, like Office is a multi-tenant application, and we'll cover a little bit about that later. And you can choose like, well, I like any account to be able to sign into my application, all the different tenants, but also personal accounts, which I typically use for Skype and Xbox. Yep. So I leave this one for default now, just to create this application. And here you will see the application or a client ID. If you build an application or you download a sample or whatnot, this is the first thing it's asking you to copy and paste inside of your configuration, your app ID. Directory or tenant ID might be useful as well, but the app ID is actually the most important piece from this page.
Gotcha.
And if you are building, I don't know, whatever, Java application, et cetera, it asks sometimes for endpoints, like my token endpoint, authorization endpoint. You can get it from this as well, because it's going to be unique for your tenant.
Right.
But I do branding, so I get a name, I can do a logo, homepage URI, et cetera. I can talk about publisher verification in a bit. Authentication is where you define your security.
Right.
So think about this. I'm going to send you as a user, if I sign in, so the new way of authentication, right? The application is not responsible for signing you anymore. We don't have a login name. We don't have a password with a submit button. We just tell you, I don't know who you are. You go to the IDP, in this case, Azure Active Directory. Figure out with that IDP who you are. Once it's done, just give me back my ID token I need. Right? That's how modern authentication works. And you're probably going to cover that in another session about tokens.
Yes.
But the one thing we do, if we actually sign you in, is we send you to IDP with your client ID. So Azure Active Directory knows, this is about this application. This is about on.NET application. Once we figured out it's really you, I do a sign in, and maybe I have to do multi-factor authentication. It's going to check if my device is compliant, all that stuff we can do on applications from administrative side. Then we're going to send you back to the so-called reply URI.
Right.
Since the tokens are kind of important, we don't want people to be sent back to any random URI and people stealing tokens. Right. It needs to be just toward the ones you control. You have to tell us which URIs those are. So for example, say I create a web application, I'm going to tell you know what, HTTPS, my own domain.com page.
Yeah.
What you could do is like my domain Azure websites.net. HTTPS, we do HTTPS. Yep. What we don't want to do is
wildcards,
because let me show what it is. If I would log in to a website, I'm going to take Project Central because they integrated with our environment.
There you go.
Look at the URI.
Yes.
It's saying client ID is CB85 blah blah. So it's telling us this is the application, and there's a redirect URI as well.
Right.
What if I just change this redirect URI to myevilwebsite.com?
Yep.
We would not want AD to return any sensitive information like tokens to that website. So what happens if you do your app registration, you're going to tell the system, you can only send information back to this or these URIs.
Right.
So what we do first is, if you start doing this, like, we're going to check if these URIs are actually in that list I just shown, to make sure we can actually return that information to a trusted environment.
Awesome.
That also means that if you would allow wildcards, hey, maybe I probably don't own all the websites under Azure Websites.net.
You don't?
No, not yet. So this is insecure. So we removed the capability. This is going to be your website. And if I add this, I can configure this, and I can have multiple ones. Typically, you like, I don't know.
Yeah, you can have a test one, you can have a QA one, you can have a production one, and then it allows you to test. I think it's only I think localhost is the only one that allows you HTTP. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah, we require HTTPS now, and this will be the same. So if you do native apps, it's a bit different, right? So let's just do an Android app. You have to do your package com.contoso app and your hash. I don't know hash out of my head. What it tells this is, on mobile, what we do, we spin up a web view. You do your sign or your system browser, but we have to know when you're done. So when the redirect goes back to this unique web address, we know it's done. It closes the web view, and it can pick up the ID token from the return address. Right. And then branch you in. So native is done a bit differently, but we still have to tell the system about what to watch for when this all stuff is happening. But web is simple; it's just a redirect, etc. So we support single-page apps like JavaScript, etc. So HTTPS.
In fact, recently announced MSL.js 2.0, right?
Yep. And it's also, so here's where the confusion starts typically for developers. Like, how do I know what configuration I need to make, what I need to do, etc., etc. So I always recommend just forget about doing this for now. The first thing I do is I go to the quick starts. So we're going to help you go through this work. So you know what? I'm going to build a web application, and it's going to be what we're going to do. Let's do Java. I don't know. You know everything about Java now.
I know everything about Java because I have already 4 hours of Java.
Exactly.
Under my belt.
So it tells you what to do, but it can actually change. So you can download the sample, but it can also change the configuration. I can make the configuration for you. Click on this button. It will tell you, I'm going to add these redirect URIs and create a client secret. I do make the updates. Yeah. I'm done. And I download the code sample. And I can run the sample anyway. And if I now go back to authentication, you will see it added these configuration steps for me. So I don't have to think about it anymore.
Very nice. There you go, so, quick start.
I'll come back to this one. The quick starts is a really good way to start and get your app to run.
Sure.
So how does this relate to service principals or enterprise apps?
Correct. So right now we have a one-to-one mapping between my app or the app that you just created and the app registration. Am I correct?
Yeah, you just create an app registration, tell the system about your app and how people can actually sign into your app. That's it.
Right.
But typically an administrator needs something to configure security, conditional access policies, require MFA, things like that. And especially if the application is going to be available for all the organizations, they want to have their own way of configuring that, right? So they don't want the developer to decide who can access the app. They want an administrator in their own environment to do that.
Yep.
So we need something for that, and that's called a enterprise app or a service principal. Those are the same thing. So whenever you hear service principal or you see enterprise apps, it's exactly the same thing.
Right.
And how I like to explain it is like the app registration is like the definition for your class, and a service principal is the instantiation of that class.
I use the same metaphor. It's exactly for people that use development or do development. I think it makes sense when you define it like this.
So if we have a single tenant application, what happens is that once you use the app, or if an administrator sets it up, it creates a single service principal, which points back to that application registration. So it knows about your application registration, but it can store information like security, settings, policies, etc.
So in a single tenant app, as soon as I create my app registration, it also creates a service principal behind the scenes, but I don't have to worry about that, right?
Yeah, typically
Perfect.
It does it for you automatically.
Nice.
But the second choice was multi-tenant. I want to be able, but I want this application to be available for all the different Azure Active Directories. So what we do, we still have a single app registration, but we're gonna create a service principal in all the directories. They all pointing back to that one single app registration in the home directory, but the service principals will be unique per directory.
And then you apply your settings on the service principal itself.
Yeah,
an ID for your company.
Right. So, for instance, the permissions is going to be different per customer, right? The policies might be different as well. So this is typically how multi-tenancy works.
Right.
And the good thing is an administrator can control all these. So they control who can create applications. They control who can create enterprise apps or service principals.
Right.
So if you go to the enterprise apps list, I probably have, let me just do the new one. Here's my app I just created.
There you go.
Here's where I assign users, for example.
Right.
Okay, only Christos can use this app. I can actually define. It's enabled, but also I can only use this app if I'm assigned to the app. It's not just available for everybody. It might be visible or invisible. So, for example, I want to show it on my apps application. Those kind of settings are done on the enterprise app or service principal.
Sweet. Is this also where we define roles, or are the roles defined inside the app registration only?
Good question. No, so app roles and user roles are configured on the application side, but I have to assign users to roles on this page. So, for example, let me see if I got an example, and that's probably Salesforce. That's always a good example.
And Salesforce is a good example of a multi-tenanted app, right?
See, I got roles assigned: a chatter-free user or a system administrator.
Yep. Lovely.
So that's where you do the assignment. So going back to this is an administrative page. You as a developer will probably never use this page, but you have to be aware that the administrator is going to use this page to set up things about your application, like who can use the application. Maybe there's some provisioning you have to do, like in the case of Salesforce. I'm automatically provisioning users in Salesforce if I assign them to my application here in Azure Active Directory.
Right.
What I also can do is from an administrator. So this is maybe not relevant for developers, but I can choose to add an application for my users from a gallery. So I'm now going to create a service principal manually. So there's two ways to get it, or there's a few ways to get a service principal in your environment. An API, you're going to create it by command line or an app to the UI like I'm doing now, or a user just using the application for the first time. And if they have the permissions, they bring in the service principal automatically as well.
Right.
But here I can just add any application. Let me just filter on OpenID Connect because that's what I like. Okay, I have no clue what kind of applications these are, so I'm just clicking randomly. Right, there's always a risk when I just add this app to my environment. We will create a service principal. I go to the app as an administrator, and I can assign the users. And the first thing when users sign in, they will see the application on the My Apps webpage.
Nice.
So interesting to know. Still, the most important page for me as a developer is the application page.
Yes.
Because this is where I do all my registrations. This is where's my that demo. I can follow around here. So another one, I don't know if you saw that when I did the
authentication.
Oh wait a minute, where's my
was that the branding? It's branding.
Publisher verification. So one of the things we see is that people start, like I said, the name. You mentioned it already.
Yeah.
You can create an on.net application too. How do I know it's coming from the right one, from the right version?
I'll create my own Salesforce and become a millionaire, right? Everybody will be using my app, subscribing. There you go. That's it.
Going back to the sign-in page for Project Central, you can see this, the name and the little check marks next to it. So if I click on it, so this app, the publisher is actually verified. Nice. That's that piece of UI you saw on the screen.
And there's a process, right? You have to submit for being approved as a trusted vendor or whatever.
Yeah, right. The good thing is we already do that because we have the Microsoft Partner Network. If you just use that AD, that's the easy one to do. So this actually helps your users trust your app more.
Yes. So my dreams of becoming a millionaire through Salesforce are not going to happen. Right.
Cool. So we talked a little bit authentication. This is the place where you can create secrets and certificates. And you know how secrets work, right? You create one on video and then not secret anymore. I always ask developers, which one do you choose here? 1 year, 2 years, or never expires?
Everybody goes for never.
Of course. So
because I don't want my app to stop working randomly because I forgot that I had a 1 year expiration policy.
Right. And it always happens that the day before it works and a day during your presentation, it just fails, right?
Or when you go on holiday and then people have to figure out why the application stopped working while you're away, right?
So please use certificates. Another one you can do here on app registration is change the way how your tokens look like. That's also something a developer has to do. I can, for example, say, well, I got my ID tokens. They're fairly small, but I like my email, my given name, and I don't know, whatever here, the tenant country, I don't know. I just make something up.
Right.
So now when I do this, if people sign in, these claims will be part of the ID token. That's something a developer can do as well.
Very nice. Are you going to talk about the limits as well? If I remember correctly, you were testing some limits the other day, didn't you?
I'm trying to. So B2C is actually a functionality which we now have in external identities, is where you can call a REST API during sign-in and transform information from the REST API inside of your tokens. Gotcha. I'm trying to find how big those tokens can get before the application stops working. So we'll see how far we can go.
But it's important for people to know that there are some limitations with the groups and roles and how much information you bring down with the tokens. So always be aware of that. You can customize them, but there is a limitation, right?
Yeah. For example, I can ask I want security groups or directory roles or all the groups or only the groups assigned to the application be part of the ID token. So I can use that information to make authorization decisions. This is also where, as an application developer, you specify what kind of permissions you're going to use. So for example, if this application is going to call Microsoft Graph, which you should because it's a great API to use, you can ask, well, you know what, this API of this application is going to use, I don't know, just what's going to make up something. What's a good one?
Calendar.
Calendar read. What happens here now is that once people sign in, remember this screen, it's going to actually tell you what permissions it needs.
Right.
And the administrator can consent for you, or you as a user can if you have the permissions. But if you do this in your app registration, you can actually ask an administrator to consent all these permissions so the users don't have to do it. But we can only do that if you as a developer specify whatever permissions your app can at one time start using.
Yeah. Also important here to clarify that some of the permissions may require admin consent.
Oh yeah. So let's take, everything all.
You could request access to specific data, but sometimes it becomes necessary for the IT admin or the Azure AD admin to come and authorize or consent to these, because it gives you access to a lot of information that we need to make sure that you should have. So for us, working with the Microsoft tenant becomes really hard to test some of this functionality because you're not allowed to have access to everybody's email.
Still no global admin. So typically all permissions are admin consent. The interesting thing is that this model is changing where administrators of the portal or of the directory can actually override these settings. So they say, no, what? I don't care that user read is not admin consentable. I will never allow any user to be able to consent with it themselves. That's something I always have to approve.
Gotcha.
So
Nice.
By defining this here, you're going to tell the administrator, by the way, these are the application permissions, these are the permissions the application need, so they can consent or not. If you're going to build APIs, this is what you're going to configure here as well. So there's a lot of, there's a roles UI now as well. Cool.
What?
Yeah.
Nice. You dropped
it. That's for the administrative roles. So yeah.
I get so excited.
And we have the manifest. So if you want to change things which are not available through the UI, you can do it here, or you can use the API. So this is just the raw format of everything we just did through the UI.
I think there's effort to surface as much functionality as possible from the manifest into the UI, so you don't have to come and mess with the actual JSON data there. But
correct. We have an API. So if you like to automate things, so we have this is the Graph Explorer. So we have a Graph API where you can retrieve all the applications, or you can just retrieve
specific one.
A specific one, like all the properties. There's always the one. So let me just run the query. You can create applications, you can update applications, you can retrieve a list of owners, etc. So if you want, for example, automate in DevOps your build of your application, you can create it, you can specify the reply URIs, you can start testing the app, and then remove it again after the build is correct. So those things are available through the UI, and the same is for the service principles. I don't know if they have them here. I don't see them here now.
Yeah, I think they're not part of the template, but you can always do the manual calls from the API.
So I think there's 2 features we don't support through the APIs yet. That's the claims transformation. So I showed you how you can change the ID token in the app registration, right? That was the token configuration.
Yep.
You can also do something on the enterprise app or the service principal where you can do, for example, transformations. Whenever we had one example where the customer had always the format employee ID at domain name, and they want to have the employee ID as a token, as a claim instead of the token. So they created a custom transformation that's done on the service principal, because let's be honest, as an app developer, I have no clue what the setup is from any of my customers. So the customer themselves, they can, on the service principal with a PowerShell script or the API, the PowerShell script, sorry, create a transformation. So anytime a user signs into that app, that employee ID would be stripped off of the email address and put in the token as a claim as well.
Nice. So much information today. Honestly,
I know.
I've learned new stuff again after using it day in, day out. There's always something new that I learn with regards to operating stations and service principals.
So just see the app registration as the definition of your app, the class definition in a sense, and the service principals are the instantiation of that class, which our customers and administrators can use to modify some of the settings which are unique to their environment.
Cool. There you have it, people. App registrations, your class definition, service principals, your instances, and you're done. Whether you're simple. So for single tenant apps, you don't really have to care about service principals as much, and then for multi-tenant apps, it becomes a lot more important because the IT admins will be dealing with the service principals. But from your perspective, when it comes to developing against these, especially in .NET, we saw the quick starts there. That was fantastic because you can actually configure the app, then download the sample code, and it allows you to kickstart your project very quickly or see how it's set up and then move the code along.
Yeah, and the last tip, the integration assistant. If you do an app registration, you've got your application running. This actually will help you test if your settings are correctly done. So say, well, I'm going to build a single page app and a web app, and it's calling APIs, evaluate, and it will tell you, oh, by the way, there's some action required here. Oh, this one is complete, blah, blah, to make sure that your settings are correct. Because let's be honest, as an administrator or as a developer, I just want to get this thing over with, especially security. Yes. I always make the joke, it's like spinach, it's good for you, but nobody likes it. Let's get past this and get back to my app because that's the thing I like. But make sure you either an administrator or you as a developer check those different settings. It will actually help you how you can develop, test, release. It's like a really good checklist for you, and especially since it knows it's a single-page app and a web app. If you add a mobile app, it will add the list of things you have to check. It has links to the documentation. So this is like everything I talked about, all the best practices you will ever hear in any session. will be listed in this single page for you as an administrator or developer.
Nice. You know what? I haven't even touched that part of the blade anymore. Like I haven't.
Yeah, I'm not going to use your apps, man.
I always troubleshoot the hard way in production. You know, I push everything in production and I try to troubleshoot and see what happened.
I know.
Hey, that was like compressed information, so much stuff there, so much goodness around Azure AD and app registrations and service principles. Matthijs, I want to thank you for coming to the show and helping us navigate through the maze that it is Microsoft Identity. And I hope everyone that watches the show gets a better idea. If you have questions, reach out to us, either Matthijs or me on Twitter. We're always there to answer questions. So thank you. Thanks, everyone.